The arrival of the unknown. Cale Drayden's hands were steady, his focus absolute as he adjusted the intricate mechanisms of a malfunctioning transport drone. His workstation, located in the outer quadrant of the Marisol repair station, was a shrine to humanity's knack for tinkering and innovation. Tools were arranged with precision, and spare parts filled bins that seemed to tell stories of voyages past. The station floated like a sentinel in the void, orbiting a dying star far from the major trade routes. To most, it was a forgotten relic, a stop for desperate travelers. But to Cale, it was home, a place where he could do what he loved most, fixing what others deemed broken. The hum of the station's intercom startled him. It was rare for the station to get visitors, rarer still for them to dock unannounced. "Attention, all personnel," the voice crackled. "Unscheduled arrival at docking bay 4. Stand by for inspection." Curiosity prickled at Cale. The Marisol station wasn't exactly a bustling hub. Unscheduled arrivals were almost unheard of. Setting aside his work, he wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag and made his way to the bay. When he arrived, the sight before him stole his breath. The vessel wasn't human-made, that much was certain. Its sleek, silver hull shimmered with a soft glow, reflecting light like liquid mercury. The ship bore intricate patterns that pulsed faintly, as though alive. It dwarfed the station's modest docking facilities, exuding an aura of power and mystery. As the airlock hissed open, Cale stood rooted in place. Emerging from the ship was a tall, imposing figure clad in armor that seemed fused to its body. The being's eyes glowed faintly, scanning its surroundings with a deliberate intensity. Behind it, a second figure appeared, smaller but no less commanding. It was a woman, human in appearance, though her skin bore a faint iridescent sheen, and her features were sharper, more refined. She stepped forward, her gaze locking onto Cale. "I am Lyra Tethran," she said, her voice smooth but edged with authority. "We require assistance." Cale blinked, trying to find his voice. I'm Cale Drayden. Mechanic here. What kind of assistance are we talking about?" Lyra gestured to the towering figure behind her. "This is Vanguard 12, our guardian. It has sustained critical damage in a recent skirmish. Its systems are failing, and we cannot proceed without repairs." The Guardian stepped forward, its movements unnervingly fluid for something so massive. Its armor was scarred and dented, with exposed circuitry sparking faintly in the dim light of the docking bay. Cale swallowed hard. "I've never seen anything like this before. I don't even know where to start." "You'll figure it out," Lyra said with quiet confidence. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Drayden. Humanity has always been underestimated, but you have a gift for making the impossible possible." Cale frowned, unsure whether to feel flattered or unnerved. "This, guardian of yours. It's not just a machine, is it?" Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "You're perceptive. Vanguard 12 is a symbiosis of technology and sentience. It's more than a tool, it's a protector, a living weapon entrusted with safeguarding my people." Cale nodded slowly, stepping closer to the Guardian. His hand hovered over a damaged section of its chest plate, where a faint blue glow pulsed erratically. "I'll do what I can," he said finally. As he worked, Cale's unease gave way to fascination. The Guardian's inner workings were a marvel of engineering, a blend of organic and synthetic components that defied human understanding. Lyra watched in silence, her expression unreadable, while Cale lost himself in the rhythm of repairs. Hours passed, and the station's usual stillness was replaced by the hum of activity. Cale didn't notice when Lyra left the bay, leaving him alone with the Guardian. He was so focused on recalibrating one of its core circuits that he almost missed the faint vibration beneath his fingers. He froze. The Guardian's eyes flickered, then glowed brighter. Its head turned slowly, and for the first time, it spoke. "Systems, stabilizing," it said, its voice a low, resonant hum. Primary directives intact. Kale stared, his tools clattering to the floor. You can talk. The Guardian's gaze settled on him. Affirmative. You are the one who restored my functionality. I am Vanguard 12. Designation, Guardian. Before Kale could respond, the station shuddered violently, alarms blaring. Lyra's voice echoed over the intercom, sharp with urgency. Kale, report to the command deck immediately. We have a situation. Kale exchanged a glance with the Guardian, its glowing eyes unblinking. He had a feeling his quiet life as a mechanic was about to change forever. The threat emerges. Kale hurried through the dimly lit corridors of the Marisol repair station, his heart pounding with both apprehension and a strange excitement. Behind him, the Guardian followed, its imposing form moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. The echoes of the alarms bounced off the metal walls, urging them onward. When they arrived at the command deck, the scene was one of controlled chaos. A holographic display dominated the room, showing a sector of space near the station. Several smaller blips clustered together on the screen, moving with precision. Lyra stood at the center, her expression a mix of focus and urgency. She looked up as Kale entered, her iridescent eyes narrowing slightly. Kale, good. We don't have much time, she said. What's going on? He asked, catching his breath. Lyra gestured to the display. Umbral Raiders. A scout fleet has entered the sector, likely probing for vulnerabilities. They've detected the station, and they're moving in fast. We estimate contact in less than 10 minutes. Kale's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories about the Umbral. A nomadic species that thrived on chaos, their technology a dark mirror to humanity's ingenuity. They were ruthless, and no one who crossed them escaped unscathed. This station isn't equipped for a fight, he said, his voice tight. We're just a repair hub. Which is why we're leaving, Lyra said. We can't afford to engage them here. The station would be obliterated. She turned to one of her officers, barking orders in a language that flowed like water. The holographic display shifted, highlighting an escape vector. Wait, Kale interrupted. You're taking the station. Lyra glanced at him, her gaze steady. No. We're evacuating personnel and critical equipment to our ship. The station will be left behind as a decoy. It's the only way to ensure our escape. Kale felt a pang of loss at the thought of abandoning the station, the only home he'd ever known. But there was no time to dwell on it. The Umbral were closing in, and survival was the priority. The Guardian stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on the display. Deploying countermeasures is advisable. A retreat without resistance will embolden the Umbral. Lyra nodded. Agreed. We'll leave a series of automated drones to distract them. Kale, I need you to ensure those drones are operational. Kale hesitated, then nodded. I'll get it done. As he left the command deck, the Guardian followed, its towering presence both intimidating and reassuring. They moved quickly through the station, heading for the maintenance bay where the drones were stored. You're awfully quiet, Kale said as they walked. Observation is crucial, the Guardian replied. You display hesitation yet proceed with determination. This dichotomy is notable. Kale huffed. Yeah, well, I've never had to abandon everything I know before. Guess I'm not built for heroics. The Guardian tilted its head slightly. Heroism is often a matter of perspective. Survival and resilience are the foundations of heroism. Kale didn't reply, focusing instead on the task ahead. When they reached the maintenance bay, he immediately set to work. The drones were old models, patched together from spare parts over the years, but they'd serve as a distraction if they held up under pressure. The Guardian watched silently, its glowing eyes scanning the room. After a moment, it stepped forward. Permit me to assist. Kale raised an eyebrow. You know how to fix drones? I possess adaptive capabilities, it said simply. Before Kale could respond, the Guardian extended its hand toward one of the drones. Tendrils of energy flowed from its fingers, weaving into the drone's circuitry. The machine whirred to life, its systems activating more smoothly than Kale had ever seen. Well, that's one way to do it, he muttered, returning to his own work. They finished the repairs in record time, deploying the drones into space. Each one carried a low-level AI program to mimic the station's signals, creating the illusion of a larger, more vulnerable target. As the last drone launched, Lyra's voice came over the intercom. Kale, Guardian, report to the docking bay. We're preparing to depart. Kale exchanged a glance with the Guardian. Guess this is it. They made their way to the bay, where the alien ship loomed like a beacon of salvation. Crews were bustling, loading equipment and personnel. Lyra stood by the airlock, overseeing the operation. Status? She asked as they approached. The drones are up and running, Kale reported. They'll buy us some time. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. Good. Now we move. As they boarded the ship, the station shuddered again, a distant explosion echoing through its hull. The Umbral were close. The alien vessel's engines roared to life, and Kale felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow as they pulled away from the station. Through the viewport, he watched as the drones lit up, scattering in all directions. The Umbral ships appeared moments later, dark and menacing, their weapons firing at the decoys. For now, the plan seemed to be working. But Kale knew this was only the beginning. As the station disappeared into the void, he turned to the Guardian. So, what now? The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter. Now, we prepare. The true battle lies ahead. Into the abyss. The alien vessel sliced through the void of space with a grace that belied its immense size. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Kale sat in the ship's common area, his mind racing as he tried to process the events of the last few hours. His hands fidgeted with a stray piece of circuitry he'd picked up during the evacuation, a habit he found grounding in moments of uncertainty. The hum of the ship's engines was interrupted by the soft, deliberate footsteps of the Guardian. Its towering form entered the room, glowing eyes settling on Kale. You are unsettled, the Guardian observed. Kale huffed a laugh, shaking his head. Unsettled doesn't quite cover it. I just left everything I know behind, got drafted into some alien conflict, and now I'm on a ship I barely understand, heading into who knows where. The Guardian tilted its head, a gesture Kale had come to interpret as curiosity. Adaptation is a cornerstone of survival. You have demonstrated resilience despite your uncertainty. Kale leaned back in his seat, letting the circuit piece roll between his fingers. Resilient or not, I still don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just a mechanic, not a soldier or a hero. The Guardian stepped closer, its presence calm but commanding. Heroism is not determined by profession or title. It is defined by action and intent. You have the capability to contribute, and that is why you were chosen. Chosen, Kale echoed. You keep saying that like it's supposed to mean something. Before the Guardian could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Lyra's voice carried through the speakers, steady but tinged with urgency. Kale, Guardian, report to the command deck. We've detected something. Kale shot a glance at the Guardian, who nodded. Rising from his seat, he followed it through the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. The alien architecture was sleek and efficient, with glowing lines running along the walls that seemed to pulse in time with the ship's engines. When they reached the command deck, the tension in the air was palpable. Lyra stood at the central console, her iridescent eyes fixed on the holographic display. Surrounding her, the crew worked with quiet precision, their movements fluid and coordinated. What's going on? Kale asked, stepping closer. Lyra gestured to the display, which showed a massive object floating in the darkness ahead. It was a structure, ancient and imposing, with spires that jutted out like jagged teeth. The surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe under the scanner's gaze. "We've stumbled upon an artifact," Lyra said. "It wasn't here the last time our fleet passed through this sector. The Umbral may have uncovered it recently." Kale frowned, studying the display. "What is it?" Lyra's expression darkened. "We're not entirely sure. But the energy readings coming from it are unprecedented. If the Umbral have found a way to harness its power, it could tip the balance of this conflict in their favor." The Guardian stepped forward, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Artifact designation aligns with pre-cataclysm records. Potential source of vast energy reserves. Immediate investigation required." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. We need to determine if this structure poses a threat and, if possible, neutralize it." Kale blinked. "Wait, you're planning to go in there? That thing looks like it could swallow us whole." "It's not a matter of choice," Lyra said sharply. "If we ignore it, the Umbral won't. And if they gain control, it could mean the end for my people, and possibly yours." Kale swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the holographic image. The structure was unnerving, to say the least, but the determination in Lyra's voice left little room for argument. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. Lyra's expression softened slightly. "You and the Guardian will accompany me on an exploration team. We'll need your technical expertise to interface with the artifact systems, assuming they're compatible." The Guardian nodded. "Joint operation enhances probability of success. Preparedness is advised." Kale sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "Not really. The shuttle they used to approach the artifact was small but nimble, gliding through the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. As they drew closer, the scale of the structure became apparent. It was massive, dwarfing even the alien ship that had carried them here. Kale sat in the back of the shuttle, his nerves on edge. Lyra was seated across from him, her gaze distant as though she were lost in thought. The Guardian stood silently at the rear, its presence a comforting constant. "Anything I should know before we go in there?" Kale asked, breaking the silence. Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Stay close, keep your wits about you, and trust the Guardian. This artifact is an enigma, and we have no idea what to expect." "Comforting," Kale muttered. The shuttle shuddered as it passed through a shimmering field surrounding the artifact. For a moment, the lights flickered, and a strange hum filled the cabin. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "We've entered the artifact's outer perimeter," Lyra said, rising to her feet. "Prepare for disembarkation." Kale followed suit, his stomach churning with unease. The shuttle landed in a cavernous chamber, its walls glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Strange symbols etched into the surfaces seemed to pulse, almost as if they were alive. "This place gives me the creeps," Kale muttered as he stepped onto the platform. "Fear is natural," the Guardian said, its voice calm. "Caution is wise. Proceed with vigilance." Lyra led the way, her steps confident despite the eerie atmosphere. Kale and the Guardian followed, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. As they ventured deeper into the structure, the air grew heavier, and the hum of energy became more pronounced. Kale's gaze was drawn to a central console embedded in the floor, a glowing monolith of shifting patterns. "This must be the core," Lyra said, her voice hushed. "Kale, see if you can interface with it." Kale hesitated, then approached the console. He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing the surface. At his touch, the patterns flared to life, and a wave of energy surged through him. Images flooded his mind, visions of ancient civilizations, cataclysmic battles, and a power so vast it defied comprehension. He staggered back, gasping. "What's wrong?" Lyra asked, her voice sharp. "It's alive," Kale managed, his voice trembling. "This thing isn't just a machine. It's something else entirely." The Guardian stepped forward, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Analysis confirms. Artifact exhibits sentience. Caution is imperative." Before they could react, the chamber shuddered violently, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the air. "Intruders detected. State your purpose or be eradicated." The voice of the artifact. The booming voice echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the glowing walls and sending a chill through Kale's spine. The Guardian stepped forward, its form bristling with energy as it analyzed the source of the sound. Lyra's sharp gaze darted around the room, assessing their precarious situation. Kale took a shaky breath, trying to steady himself. "Intruders detected," the artifact had said. But what kind of artifact could talk? He glanced at Lyra, hoping she had answers. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's expression was calm but calculating. "We talk," she said, stepping forward. "This artifact is ancient. It likely operates on logic or programmed protocols. We need to prove we aren't a threat." The Guardian nodded, its glowing eyes brightening. "Acknowledged. Diplomacy and inquiry will proceed." Before Lyra could speak, the voice returned, deeper and more insistent. "State your purpose." Lyra lifted her head, her voice clear and firm. "We are travelers seeking knowledge. We mean no harm. This structure holds significance to the future of many civilizations, and we wish to understand its purpose." For a moment, there was silence, the room heavy with tension. Then, the glowing patterns on the walls shifted, swirling into new shapes. The voice responded, its tone less menacing but still commanding. "Knowledge requires worthiness. Demonstrate your value or face elimination." Kale winced. "Demonstrate value? How exactly are we supposed to do that?" The Guardian's voice interrupted, steady and deliberate. "This is likely a trial. Ancient artifacts of significant power often require proof of intent and capability before granting access." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. Be ready for anything." As if on cue, the chamber began to transform. The walls stretched and shifted, forming intricate pathways. The glowing patterns converged into a central pillar, which pulsed with an intense light. The voice returned, louder and more resonant. "The trial of resolve begins. Step forward, chosen ones, and prove your worth." Lyra exchanged a glance with Kale and the Guardian. "This is it. Stay close, and don't let your guard down." They advanced cautiously, the pillar acting as a guide. The first trial appeared quickly, a vast chasm that spanned the room, with no apparent way across. The walls pulsed with energy, casting eerie shadows across the gap. Lyra scanned the area. "This is a test of ingenuity. Kale, you're up." Kale's stomach tightened. "Me? What am I supposed to do?" "Use your skills," Lyra said. "The artifact likely recognizes abilities beyond brute force. Look for a solution." Kale approached the edge of the chasm, squinting at the glowing floor below. Patterns shifted in complex sequences, almost like a puzzle. His eyes darted to a series of panels on the wall, each one flickering with a different rhythm. "This looks like a power grid," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "If I can sync the sequences, it might activate a bridge." The Guardian stepped beside him. "Your assessment is likely correct. Proceed." Kale knelt beside the nearest panel, his hands moving with practiced precision. The challenge was intricate, each panel requiring careful alignment with the shifting patterns. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, the pressure mounting with every passing second. Finally, with a low hum, the patterns aligned. The chasm filled with light and a shimmering bridge materialized, connecting the two sides. Kale exhaled in relief, standing up. That should do it. Lyra smiled faintly. Impressive. Let's move. The next chamber was darker, the air heavier. The glowing symbols on the walls twisted into ominous shapes, and a low growl echoed through the space. Shadows coalesced into forms, taking on the shape of humanoid figures with glowing eyes. Combat trial, Lyra said grimly, drawing a sleek, iridescent blade from her side. Guardian, you're up. The Guardian stepped forward, its form radiating power. Engaging defensive protocols. The shadow figures lunged, their movements quick and erratic. The Guardian met them head-on, its energy pulses disrupting their forms with every strike. Lyra moved with precision, her blade slicing through the shadows with ease. Kale stood back, heart racing as he watched. His instincts told him to stay out of the fight, he was no warrior. But as one of the shadow figures broke past the others, heading straight for him, he realized he had no choice. He scrambled for a tool from his belt, a small plasma torch he used for repairs. As the shadow lunged, he activated the torch, slashing through the figure. To his surprise, the shadow dissolved on contact. Not bad, mechanic. Lyra called, dispatching another shadow. The battle was brief but intense. As the last shadow dissipated, the chamber returned to its previous state, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Well done, the Guardian said, turning to Kale. Adaptation under duress demonstrates resolve. Kale managed a shaky smile. Glad you think so. The final chamber was the most daunting. The air hummed with energy, and at the center of the room stood a massive structure, a crystalline sphere suspended in a column of light. It pulsed with an almost sentient presence. The voice returned, resonating through the room. Final trial, unity. Only through harmony will the path forward be revealed. Lyra frowned. Unity? What does that mean? The Guardian stepped forward. Analysis suggests a convergence of intent. Our connection must be synchronized. Kale hesitated. You mean, we all have to work together? Precisely, the Guardian replied. As they approached the sphere, it emitted tendrils of light that reached toward them. Each tendril connected with one of them, Lyra, the Guardian, and Kale, forming a glowing link. Focus your thoughts, the Guardian instructed. Visualize our shared purpose, protection, understanding, and resolve. Kale closed his eyes, his mind racing. He thought of his life on the station, his love for fixing things, and his growing desire to help these people. Slowly, his thoughts aligned with the Guardian's calm strength and Lyra's determination. The sphere pulsed brighter, and a path of light extended forward, leading deeper into the artifact. The voice returned, its tone almost approving. You have proven your worth. Proceed. Lyra turned to Kale, her expression softening. You did well. Let's see what lies ahead. As they stepped onto the glowing path, Kale felt a strange sense of unity. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was part of something much larger, and the adventure was only beginning. The heart of the artifact. The glowing path led them deeper into the artifact's core, the air growing warmer and charged with energy. The crystalline walls pulsed in rhythm, almost as if the artifact were alive. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though the only presence he could sense was the artifact itself. As they approached the end of the path, the chamber opened into a vast, dome-like expanse. In the center hovered a massive, multifaceted crystal suspended in a column of shimmering light. The crystal refracted the light into dazzling patterns that danced across the walls. It was breathtaking, yet ominous. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her sharp gaze scanning the chamber. This must be the artifact's core. The energy readings are off the scale. The Guardian moved to stand beside her, its glowing eyes fixed on the crystal. Core integrity stable. Energy levels suggest self-sustaining functionality. Potential repository of ancient knowledge and power. Kale approached slowly, his heart pounding. So, what do we do with it? Is this thing a weapon? A power source? Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. That's what we need to find out. If the Umbral discovered this first, they might already be working on harnessing it. We need to ensure it doesn't fall into their hands. Before anyone could respond, the crystal flared brightly, and the booming voice of the artifact returned, more resonant than before. Welcome, chosen ones. You stand before the heart of eternity. Speak your purpose. Kale felt the hairs on his neck stand up. Heart of eternity. That's not ominous at all. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. We seek to understand you. Your power could save countless lives, but it could also destroy them. We wish to ensure it is not misused. The light around the crystal dimmed slightly, as if it were considering her words. Your intent is noted. The heart safeguards knowledge and energy from an era long past. Only those deemed worthy may access its secrets. You must prove your unity once more. Kale groaned. Another test. Haven't we done enough proving? The Guardian placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Each trial refines purpose. This final test will determine alignment with the heart's directives. The ground beneath them began to shift, the smooth floor rearranging itself into an intricate grid. Symbols illuminated the surface, glowing faintly, while energy pulsed through the lines connecting them. Lyra frowned. What is this? A puzzle, the Guardian said. The patterns align with the artifact's symbology. Coordination and precision are required. Kale crouched, studying the grid. Looks like we need to activate the right sequence of symbols. If we get it wrong, who knows what'll happen. Lyra glanced at him. You're the expert. Can you solve it? He sighed. Probably. But I'll need your help, and the Guardians too. For the next several minutes, they worked as a team. Kale directed their movements, analyzing the patterns while Lyra and the Guardian followed his instructions. Each symbol lit up as they stepped on it in the correct order, the energy pulsing brighter with each success. This is like some cosmic game of hopscotch, Kale muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Lyra smirked faintly. You're doing well. Just don't mess it up. No pressure, he shot back. The final sequence required all three of them to synchronize their movements. Kale held his breath as they stepped onto the last set of symbols. The grid flared brilliantly, and a wave of energy swept through the chamber. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the crystal's light intensified, and the voice returned, calm and approving. You have demonstrated unity, resolve, and understanding. The heart recognizes your worth. Approach. As they stepped closer to the crystal, a new light emerged from its core, a swirling sphere of energy that seemed to contain an entire galaxy within it. The sight was mesmerizing, and Kale felt a strange pull, as if the sphere were calling to him. This is it, Lyra whispered. The artifact's true power. The Guardian's voice was low and reverent. Contained within is knowledge of ancient civilizations, their triumphs and failures. It is a key to both creation and destruction. Kale hesitated. So, what do we do with it? Do we take it? Leave it here. Lyra's gaze was thoughtful, yet wary. We can't risk the Umbral finding it. But we also don't fully understand its nature. Moving it could destabilize the structure, or worse. The crystal pulsed again, and the voice returned. The heart's power is not to be taken lightly. It exists to protect and guide. Those who seek to wield it must swear to uphold balance and safeguard life. Lyra nodded. We swear it. On behalf of my people, I vow to use this power only for protection and preservation. The Guardian added, directive alignment confirmed. Commitment to balance affirmed. All eyes turned to Kale. He felt the weight of their gazes and the enormity of the decision. I'm just a mechanic, he said quietly. But I've seen enough destruction to know we need something like this to stand against it. I swear to do my part. The crystal flared brilliantly, and the swirling sphere of energy detached, floating toward them. It hovered between them, its light bathing them in a warm, radiant glow. The heart entrusts its power to you. Guard it well, chosen ones, for the future of countless worlds depends on your resolve. As they exited the artifact, the energy sphere now contained within a protective casing, Kale felt a strange mixture of pride and trepidation. They had succeeded, but the journey was far from over. The Guardian's voice broke the silence. The heart's power is both a blessing and a burden. Vigilance is imperative. Kale nodded, glancing at Lyra. So, what now? Lyra's eyes were steady, yet a flicker of determination shone in them. Now, we prepare. The Umbral won't stop, and this power will make us their primary target. But with the heart and our unity, we have a fighting chance. As the alien vessel carried them away from the artifact, Kale couldn't help but think about how far he'd come. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was part of something much greater, a mission to protect not just one world, but many. And this was only the beginning. Shadows on the horizon. The alien vessel sped through the void, the heart of eternity secured in a heavily shielded containment unit aboard the ship. The artifact's swirling energy pulsed faintly, casting mesmerizing patterns of light across the walls of the chamber where it was stored. Kale, Lyra, and the Guardian stood before it, their faces illuminated by its glow. We've succeeded in obtaining the heart, Lyra said, her tone measured. But this is only the beginning of the war it will bring. The Umbral won't stop until they've claimed it, or destroyed us trying. Kale crossed his arms, his nerves fraying under the weight of the situation. Do we even know how to use this thing? It feels like we're carrying a lit fuse without knowing how long the wick is. The Guardian's voice was steady, its glowing eyes fixed on the heart. The heart's potential is vast, but it requires understanding to wield effectively. Immediate activation is inadvisable without further analysis. Lyra nodded. Agreed. The heart is a weapon, a beacon, and a responsibility. For now, we focus on securing it and deciphering its secrets. We'll head for the Centauri Nexus, a neutral outpost where we can regroup and prepare. Kale's brow furrowed. The Umbral aren't just going to let us slip away, are they? As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life. A sharp voice from the bridge shouted through the speakers. Commander Lyra, Umbral ships detected. They're closing in fast. Lyra's jaw tightened, and she turned to the Guardian. Prepare for engagement. Kale, stay close to the heart and monitor its containment. If anything changes, alert me immediately. The ship shuddered as its shields activated, and the low hum of its weapons systems powering up reverberated through the corridors. Kale's stomach churned as he followed Lyra and the Guardian to the command deck, bracing himself for what was to come. The command deck was alive with activity, alien officers moving with precision as the ship's systems lit up with warnings. On the central display, a cluster of dark, jagged ships closed in on their position. The Umbral fleet was smaller than expected, but their presence was no less menacing. 3 scout-class vessels and 1 command frigate, Lyra said, analyzing the display. They're testing us. If they realize we have the heart, they'll call for reinforcements. The Guardian stepped forward, its towering form commanding the room. Engage defensively. Preserve the heart's safety above all. Lyra nodded. Agreed. Focus on evasion and countermeasures. Let's not give them an opening to call for backup. The ship's engines roared as it banked hard, weaving through the stars to avoid incoming fire. The Umbral ships unleashed volleys of dark energy, their weapons crackling with malevolent power. The alien crew worked seamlessly to maintain their shields and return fire, the tension thick in the air. Kale stood to the side, gripping a railing for support as the ship rocked from an impact. His heart raced as he watched the battle unfold on the display. "Lyra," he said, his voice unsteady, "I'm no tactician, but it looks like they're trying to hurt us somewhere." Lyra's sharp eyes snapped to him, then back to the display. "He's right. They're driving us toward a trap." The Guardian's voice resonated with calm urgency. "Recommend immediate course deviation. Escape vector must prioritize unpredictability." Lyra issued the command, and the ship veered sharply, cutting through a dense asteroid field to break the Umbral's formation. The maneuver bought them precious moments, but the enemy ships adapted quickly, their movements unnervingly coordinated. "They're relentless," Kale muttered, gripping the railing tighter as another impact rocked the ship. Lyra turned to him, her voice low but firm. "Kale, we need every advantage we can get. You're good with systems, can you find a way to boost our defenses or disrupt theirs?" Kale hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try. Point me to the system's interface." One of the officers gestured him toward a console, and Kale dived into the alien technology. His fingers flew across the interface as he worked to decipher the systems, his mechanics instincts guiding him. "This ship's shield emitters are operating below capacity," he said. "If I reroute power from non-essential systems, we can reinforce them." "Do it," Lyra commanded. Kale executed the adjustments, and moments later, the ship's shields flared brighter, absorbing a direct hit with minimal damage. "Shields holding at 85%, an officer reported. Kale exhaled in relief but didn't stop working. "Now let's see if we can mess with their targeting systems." As the battle raged on, the Guardian engaged in a daring maneuver. It interfaced directly with the ship's weapons systems, enhancing their precision. Energy blasts fired with pinpoint accuracy, striking key points on the Umbral ships. One scout vessel erupted in a fiery explosion, the shockwave rippling through space. The remaining ships faltered briefly before regrouping, their aggression redoubling. "They're not giving up," Lyra said, her voice tight. "We need to end this before reinforcements arrive." The Guardian turned to Lyra, its voice steady. "Deploy containment measures. Focus fire on the frigate. Disabling their command ship will disrupt their cohesion." Lyra nodded, issuing the command. The ship's weapons unleashed a concentrated barrage, battering the Umbral frigate's shields. As the enemy vessel began to falter, the scout ship scrambled to protect it, their formation breaking. "Now's our chance," Lyra shouted. Kale's console lit up with warnings, and he realized the heart's energy was fluctuating slightly. "Lyra, the heart's containment is holding, but it's reacting to the stress on the ship. We need to wrap this up, or we risk losing control." Lyra's gaze hardened. "Understood. All units, focus fire on the command frigate. Bring it down now." The final volley was devastating. The Umbral frigate's hull shattered under the assault, its remains scattering into the void. The surviving scout ships hesitated, then broke off, retreating into the darkness. Cheers erupted on the command deck, but Lyra's focus remained sharp. "Status report. Umbral ships retreating," an officer confirmed. "Damage to our vessel is minimal." The heart's containment remained stable. Lyra allowed herself a small sigh of relief. "Well done, everyone. We've bought ourselves some time, but this is far from over." She turned to Kale and the Guardian. "We need to reach the Centauri Nexus as quickly as possible. The Umbral won't stay quiet for long, and we need allies if we're going to protect the heart." Kale nodded, exhaustion setting in. "I just hope it's enough." The Guardian's glowing eyes fixed on him, its voice calm but resolute. "Resolve is the key to survival. Together, we will endure." As the ship resumed its course, Kale gazed out at the stars, a growing determination settling in his chest. The journey ahead would be perilous, but he was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The Nexus and the final stand. The alien vessel glided toward the Centauri Nexus, a massive orbital station that hung in the void like a shimmering jewel. The Nexus was renowned as a neutral ground, a hub of diplomacy, trade, and technology where beings from across the galaxy gathered. Its sprawling structure gleamed with lights, and thousands of ships buzzed around it like fireflies. Kale stood at the viewport, marveling at the sight. He'd heard of the Nexus before, but seeing it in person was awe-inspiring. Lyra joined him, her expression tense but hopeful. The Nexus is our best chance. It's one of the few places where we might find allies strong enough to stand against the Umbral. Kale nodded. Do you think they'll help us? Or will they see the heart as too dangerous? Lyra's gaze didn't waver. That's the risk we take. But if the Umbral get their hands on the heart, it won't matter. We'll all fall. The ship's intercom crackled, the pilot announcing their approach. As the vessel docked with the Nexus, the crew prepared for their next move. The Nexus's interior was a bustling hive of activity, with beings of all shapes and sizes moving through its gleaming corridors. The diversity was staggering: humanoids, insectoids, crystalline forms, and others Kale couldn't even begin to categorize. Lyra led the way, her sharp presence cutting through the crowd as she headed toward the Nexus Council chamber. The Guardian followed silently, its imposing form drawing curious and wary glances from passers-by. As they entered the chamber, Kale felt a wave of unease. The room was vast, its walls adorned with holographic projections of star maps and alien symbols. At its center was a circular dais where representatives of various species convened. The council members turned their attention to Lyra, their expressions a mix of curiosity and suspicion. A tall, reptilian figure with emerald scales spoke first, its voice a deep rumble. Commander Lyra Tethran of the Xeon Fleet. Why have you come to the Nexus, bringing with you such disruptive energy? Lyra stepped forward, her tone commanding but respectful. Esteemed counselors, we come seeking aid. The Umbral forces have discovered a powerful artifact, the Heart of Eternity, and we now bear it to ensure it does not fall into their hands. If they harness its power, it will mean destruction for us all. A crystalline being shimmered as it spoke, its voice melodic. You bring a weapon of unimaginable power to this station and ask for trust. How do we know you will not misuse it yourselves? Before Lyra could respond, the Guardian stepped forward, its voice resonating through the chamber. The heart is entrusted to those who demonstrate unity, resolve, and protection of life. This responsibility is shared among us to ensure its safety and balance. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the Guardian's words settling over the council. Another representative, a humanoid with glowing markings, spoke. Even if your intentions are noble, the Umbral are relentless. They will come for the heart, and they will bring war to the Nexus. Why should we risk ourselves for your cause? Kale couldn't hold back any longer. Because it's not just our cause, he said, stepping forward. The Umbral don't stop. They'll consume everything in their path, your homes, your families, your lives. The heart isn't just a weapon, it's a chance to stop them. But we can't do it alone. The council murmured among themselves, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, the reptilian leader spoke again. Your words carry truth, human. But our decision cannot be made lightly. We will deliberate. As they waited for the council's verdict, Kale and Lyra returned to the ship. The Guardian remained stationed near the heart, its vigilant presence a constant reminder of the stakes. Hours passed, and Kale found himself pacing the ship's corridors, unable to shake the feeling that time was running out. His thoughts were interrupted by the blare of alarms. Umbral ships detected, came a panicked voice over the intercom. They've breached the Nexus perimeter. Kale sprinted to the command deck, where Lyra and the Guardian were already assessing the situation. The central display showed the Nexus surrounded by dark, menacing Umbral vessels. They've come for the heart, Lyra said grimly. The Council's deliberations won't matter if we don't survive this. The Guardian turned to her. Deployment of combined forces is necessary. Recommend immediate coordination with Nexus defenses. Lyra nodded, issuing orders to the crew. Kale, stay with the heart. If the Umbral board the ship, it'll be up to you to protect it. Kale's stomach churned, but he nodded. I won't let them take it. The battle erupted in a cacophony of light and sound as the Nexus defenses clashed with the Umbral fleet. Energy beams and plasma bolts streaked across the void, illuminating the darkness with bursts of destruction. Kale remained in the heart's chamber, his pulse pounding as the ship shuddered with every impact. The containment unit glowed steadily, but the artifact's energy began to pulse erratically, reacting to the chaos around it. The door to the chamber hissed open, and Kale spun around, his plasma torch in hand. A group of Umbral soldiers stormed in, their twisted forms bristling with dark energy. You're not taking it. Kale shouted, activating the torch. The first soldier lunged, and Kale swung the torch in a wide arc, the intense heat slicing through its armor. He ducked as another fired a projectile, narrowly avoiding it. Before he could be overwhelmed, the Guardian charged into the room, its energy flaring. It dispatched the remaining soldiers with precision, its movements a blend of strength and elegance. Protective measures initiated, the Guardian said. Remain focused, Kale Ryland. Kale nodded, his hands trembling as he tightened his grip on the torch. I'm trying. As the battle raged on, the Nexus's defenses began to falter. The Umbral's command ship unleashed a devastating blast that pierced the station's shields, sending debris hurtling into space. Lyra's voice crackled over the intercom. We're running out of time. Guardian, we need to activate the heart. The Guardian turned to Kale, its glowing eyes unwavering. This is the pivotal moment. Will you assist in unlocking the heart's potential? Kale swallowed hard, his fear clashing with his determination. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the containment unit. The heart flared to life, its energy enveloping him and the Guardian in a radiant glow. Visions flooded his mind, stars, civilizations, and the balance of creation and destruction. Guided by the Guardian, he focused the heart's power, channeling it outward. A massive pulse of energy erupted from the ship, sweeping through the Umbral fleet. Their ships disintegrated under the wave, leaving only silence in its wake. When the light faded, the Nexus was intact, and the Umbral were gone. Lyra and the crew stood in stunned silence, the weight of their victory sinking in. Kale staggered back, his body trembling from the effort. The Guardian steadied him, its voice calm. Your resolve has proven vital. Balance is maintained, for now. Lyra approached, her expression one of gratitude and determination. We've won this battle, but the war isn't over. The heart will remain a target, and we must stay vigilant. Kale managed a weak smile. I guess I'm not just a mechanic anymore, huh? No, Lyra said with a faint smile. You're much more than that. As the ship prepared to leave the Nexus, Kale gazed out at the stars, a sense of purpose filling him. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but he knew one thing for certain, he was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The adventure had only just begun.